Coming from the head. He only thinks he's ongoing hunting, something that's still there, like this uh, dragging of his past pain, and that is just taking a bigger form. But in reality, it is the Minotaur head influencing him. Not the impulsive, it's just the, I think I can say, but I always want to say what I think, like, I was just gonna be a one. Now, excellent. I'm just gonna do a little introduction. Hello, everybody. Here with me is the amazing Rob, the writer from Tenjin, the lore, and we are now working on the Voljaryk journey and the motivations and everything that happens in there. And in the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to be discussing a few of the acts and events in that story, so you can guys have a little bit more of an insight. Oh my God, insight into the process. That's it.
Just to catch people up, the last time I talked to Luis, Finn, who's another member of the Black Forge crew, was also on board, and we were going over some initial ideas and then sort of flesh them out with a bit bigger. And basically, Luis and Finn gave me some stuff to go away with, so that's what we've been pondering. And what we've got today is essentially the plot run through for the first volume or the first section of the plot. There's 4 in total, and we're going to be looking at part 1 today, just to make sure that the plot points all hit correctly and that it's in line with Luis's overall idea for how Voljaryk evolves.
Interesting one. Honestly, I'm very excited because I think it's a very challenging, because we're making a father wanting to kill his sons, and that is extreme. And so how do you drive someone to that kind of extreme to make that understandable? You feel like, okay, I can see why. I don't feel like, well, that was weird. So in here we have one of the notes. Should I show the notes? Or just...
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Here we also, just a heads up that any spoilers from for Blood Oak Chapter 1 is going to be muted, so we keep to the verdict only. So I had a look this afternoon, and I like it overall. My only question would be on the mentor. Like, what was the necessity for him to being alive? Like, I can see him as a tool to help something, but if you could walk me through.
Yeah, of course. So to go back to where he came from, I suppose, the last time we discussed this, one of the things that we wanted to get over was as Luis says, what we've tried to do is set up the idea that he is someone who eventually becomes capable of making the kinds of decisions that make him a fearsome leader and make him a followable man who has got a level of ability and rage to him that he gets a lot of respect as he ages, and as people see him more and more as sort of their chieftain, their king. But we also need him just as equally possible of making terrible decisions based on his pride, his anger. And one of the notes that we made last time around was saying that we don't want it to go like Game of Thrones season 7. We don't want a sudden bullshit turnaround of and now Daenerys is crazy. It needs to be really subtly signposted right from the very beginning, so that you actually feel that even when he's young, he's capable of things that are awkward. And the original draft that I wrote, it was a bit more of a sort of a pally campfire scene with hunters going out with Voljaryk, and that was the idea. But it lacked any sort of a sense of risk, or he didn't come over as particularly mindful of the others. And Finn brought up the idea of someone who's a bit more of a mentor figure, someone who's or at least he's close enough to that it becomes a bit of an added element of a serious decision when Voljaryk has the choice later on in part 1 of either leaving it be or charging in. him ignoring his friend and mentor, whatever form that takes, and we decide that today, was kind of the idea that it shows Voljaryk as being a flawed figure, because he ends up picking his own motivations and his own sort of drive over the safety of someone that is important to him. The reason that I've wanted to keep him alive is because one of the big problems we've had is that if everyone, this is basically that during the plot that we're discussing, on a kind of an adventure into the old world, Voljaryk died. Voljaryk survived, and everyone else previously was dying, and then he was going to come back, and he would be embraced by the townsfolk, as it were, as the sort of the survivor. But the problem with that is that it sounds shady if you come back from a hunting party and everyone's dead and you're not, and you go, oh man, oh, there was this catastrophe, then people might think that you were the catastrophe at a base level. And this guy doesn't need to survive forever. I mean, and that's the other contention, is he can get back. I mean, he can be near death, he can be brought back, and then he can sort of tell the tale through his own eyes, especially if he didn't see everything that went down. It ends up being quite a neat tool. But the other thing is that last time we talked to you and Finn were talking about the fact that he's internally conflicted. And I like the idea that perhaps he knows right from the beginning that he's a bit of a fraud, because he knows this guy is sort of saying, oh, you know, he saved us all, and he saved me, and I'd be dead without him, and he got me out of there. And actually what this guy didn't see is that a lot of people died because of his actions. And even right from the beginning, when everyone's saying, we can't believe that you're amazing, we'll follow you, or we'll look to you as someone who is strong in our village, as he sleeps that night, he knows straight away that there's a little bit of a lie tainting that. And it allows that, we've talked about imposter syndrome, the idea that he's worried that maybe he's not who he thinks he is. And that just sowing little seeds of paranoia right from the beginning, and the idea that he might ever want to get caught out. So I know it's a bit, it's the difficulty is that it might be a bit clumsy. I understand that you don't want a character that just exists as a plot device. So it's tying in that sense of it being a person that he wouldn't usually, if he was thinking rationally, risk being hurt. And then of course the second that he gets what he wants, or he sees what he wants, so in this case this animal he's hunting, he just sort of totally ignores all advice and ends up with, you know, immediate sadness and regret, and then still goes wrong again. Which
shows also of his personality, because we have defined that during the first act, you know, Voljaryk, he's, I'm putting here, because I'm not sure if the scream is being recorded as well, the both, or just this one, so I put in there. So you're probably seeing each other, you're seeing yourself there, right?
Yeah.
So the motivations for Voljaryk is what is a very, you know, strong driving force for everything that he does, and all the problems that he creates for himself, which he sometimes doesn't seem him being the one to blame for. And one thing that Voljaryk is, he's not from the village, he's from he's like a kind of something that Rob mentioned on the first little draft there with the ideas. He's a foundling, and that's why he also, you know, such a giant if compared to other people, you know, taller than others. And what he wants there is getting the respect from those around him. And the problem with, you know, desires is that we always have something that comes from our inner side, that it works as a barrier for that desire to fulfill. And in his case, he's a natural loner. He feels like he can do things by himself, and that doesn't work well when he wants to please a tribe that works in a way of the community.
That's it, and I think one of the things that we really want to generate is this idea that this paranoia and this worry about the entire world being out to get him grows and grows. And I think one of the best ways of rooting that is that in life, quite often paranoia begins with a seed of truth, which then becomes blown out of proportion. And I think the fact that he's a foundling and the fact that he isn't part of the town, do they hate him? No, that's an overreach. They don't hate him. It's just he is technically an outsider. There is a sense that if you are an outsider to a group of anyone, of any humans or any people, they won't immediately accept you. They will certainly tolerate your presence, and they won't be actively hostile towards you. But there will be a gentle sense that they need to see that you are made of something which relates to them. And so his initial paranoia that he's treated as an outsider and doesn't have the respect is actually kind of true, which is quite nice, because, and then kind of almost immediately depressingly and heartbreakingly, the second that they see him as being someone who is worthy of respect, is the exact sort of nexus point of him starting to think, if I ever get found out exactly what happened there, someone might try and take this away from me, or at least thinking I'm a little bit of a fraud, and just having that just ever so gently edge into his dreams. I mean, we hadn't discussed this idea of dreams and nightmares until our last discussion, and it was such a nice idea having, I think it was you and Finn who mentioned the idea of him sort of starting to have these nightmares, which get increasingly populated with the people that he's failed, and being sort of chased after by that. And I think that paranoia starts with such a small idea of I'm a bit different to everyone else, and then it's the nice thing is we can just cumulatively make that feel like a noisier section of his head as he's getting towards making some really tragic decisions.
Exactly. And one thing that is interesting is that this ghost, this that appeal for him as his friend initially, is also a kind of a metaphor for the trauma itself, speaking to him, the experience, how this is something that it hunts him to a level that it affects his decisions not only in the present now, but also in the future, to the point that bad things happen, and only because of this little thing that he can't get rid of. He has a way to hold on to sanity for a while, but we define that the character is gonna die and that way when she dies is when everything goes to hell. Okay, now that is where we begin officially his downfall. He had hope to that point, but after that he kind of had hope, but after that everything goes south. And even though the story says otherwise, you see that things are getting worse. And we all explore everything from the perspective of the Sons, and we're excited about it. We're going to be using the two final acts to look from the perspective of Frank initially, or Huggy, I not recall, and then the final act, the other one. And then that's when we're going to see the true side of Voljaryk, how others are seeing him, and how this hunting that he has constantly is being shown to the others around him, because we can see, we see how he sees things, we can see through his eyes and say, oh yeah, he's talking to that guy, yeah, but we never fully put ourselves in the place of the others around him. So through the two final acts, you're gonna see that, and it's gonna be really interesting.
I think building that with this mentor character is going to be important, because one of the really weird things about this idea of this mentor, who quite early on in the whole plot arc dies, is that it's a weird thing to write, because he's going to become possibly more important in death as a ghost in terms of the and it's it's open to interpretation. Is Voljaryk being haunted, or is it literally just his own mind sort of finding these doubts and worries through the voice of someone who he used to listen to for advice? It's quite a nice way of firming up that idea that his suspicions are becoming more and more firm. And one of the things we talked about last time is that we're going to have to jump forwards in time in every section of the story. So to begin with a young Voljaryk as he proves himself, and then the leap forward is when it's consolidated on that and is sort of the man of his village and is fighting under one of the larger lords of the area. I can't remember. What's the name for the kind of the overlord? I always forget.
Cunning.
And the Cunning, obviously, yes. And he's fighting under him, and and by that point he's a bit older. But what's quite nice is we have that second part to follow him then, and by this point the dreams have really set in, and we can, even that early insinuation from this ghost, part of his personality is manifesting as his mentor in his dreams, just gently suggesting that his sons are very much like he is, even when they're young. This idea that your sons are a lot like you, just because of course there's nothing more horrifying to someone who's duplicitous and has actually sacrificed everyone around him to get what he wants, than the idea that he's raising two children who very much think the same, or very much appear to be the same sort of personality. Because then your immediate thought will be, one day they'll come for me, regardless of what the truth is. It starts to, the rot is there. And I think it's quite nice, Yeah,
it just reminded me of maybe it was a TV show or a movie that people start to compliment a lot the son of this mafia guy, something like that, and he started to get in this kind of paranoia, like, who is that? Was a mafia? I have a feeling it was a mafia, but I can't tell. Maybe somebody watching can correct us in the comments. But pretty much, it's a kind of, like, okay, they're doing great and people are loving them. Maybe they're loving them more than me, and maybe they're gonna feel that love and they're gonna feel like they're above me for some reason. They're gonna now it's easy to track on the paranoia once it starts with the little seed that you mentioned before, and that's the interesting thing, because we can always identify with that. Not going crazy like that, but how sometimes a little thing can make you paranoid for 1 to 2 days. In case of Voljaryk, it's until his final day, unfortunately, but it is something that I'm looking forward for this. It's very challenging, for everyone that's watching. It takes quite some time to take all this motivation, everything right. Me and Rob, we meet, every week, every 2 weeks, we are there talking and changing ideas, making sure that everything is connected and making sense. So it is a lot of hard work, isn't it?
I think it's something that we care about. I mean, everyone on the project, everyone involved with Black Forge has all got their own fantasy, some of the pinnacle of what they think is good fantasy. But of course, because we all watch and read a lot of fantasy, it means we've also watched and read a lot of very bad fantasy. And you see all these pitfalls, and you see these badly explained plot arcs where there's massive plot holes where you think what, or where suddenly there's a really cheesy plot device suddenly gets thrown out of nowhere and it just feels like the whole thing's clumsy. And one of the things that when Luis brought me onto the project, what was really nice was there's so much backstory and so much wider plotting that you guys can't see yet because it will be a spoiler, but there's huge documents of what's connected and what could, and nothing's tied so firmly that it will, which is really good, which means that it becomes too restrictive. But there are much bigger ideas, and actually it means that doing these meetings is there's always challenges, and sometimes there'll be complete U-turns while we're discussing and sort of go, actually it can't be like that because that won't work. And then Luis will say, well, actually, what if we did it this way? And then we completely change. But actually, the nice thing is because we're working with an underpinning sense of this is the overall flow of how this world operates and the direction in which it's going, it at least means that when you find the right idea, it feels really good suddenly, because it kind of, it's like finding the right jigsaw piece and you suddenly go, okay, actually that really ties into everything else we've done.
Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, this first part of this scene we were quite sort of originally quite vague about how it was going to go, and it's just come together pretty naturally. But it's because one of the things that Luis tends to set up is really finding the emotional motivations first and making sure that the plot points are just all working in support of the bigger underlying message. And I think that's helped us a lot. And in this case, especially for this first part, this open of how you're introduced to this character, originally we had him being very sort of almost kind of like a wide-eyed innocent man telling these guys around the campfire that he was gonna kill the biggest animal they'd ever seen, and they're all laughing at him, and he's sort of he's almost so driven that he doesn't mind that they're laughing at him. And it didn't quite fit because he felt too passive in a way that if he's supposed to get heated and we're supposed to see him get really angry when things don't go his way, then it would be weird if he already thinks he's an outsider and then everyone starts laughing at him. Why would he sit there and take it? Even out of sheer feelings foolish that everyone thinks he's a fool, he would naturally get pretty ratty about it and start being angry. And it's little things like that which, the second you write it down as a sort of a bullet point and think, okay, what if we do it this way? It works with what we've got planned for him, and it's suddenly, of course, if you're any young man will know that if you get laughed at a certain age, even now perhaps, then you might get really pissed off. And so making him this sort of paragon of virtue who just takes it in good humour felt wrong. And so now it's nice. Now it feels like you see straight away he's driven and he's there and he's hanging out with these other guys, kind of not entirely what he wants to do, but he feels like he has to get respect. But he's still not actually going to take any shit, and everyone starts mocking him and he gets pissed off.
this is what makes these meetings great, because then we told each other little observations and points, and then we go, okay, now that makes sense. And then sometimes, like you said, one of the other times, wait, if you do this, that rule for the portal and the tree of life, I think I'm gonna mute this just in case. That specific rule, it gets broken, and then it creates like a snowball effect with many things. The story is affected, so we kind of trace back a little bit and made sure to be faithful to the original idea. And it's interesting to say that, because like in the beginning, with that, he kind of came across confident that expect, because confident in a way that like, oh, nothing gets to me, which then would be a problem, because how do you make someone like this? I think it becomes harder. I think it's possible. No, it's always with the right motivation, everything's possible. But I think it would be more challenging. But
I agree. I think the problem with tragic characters is that what you don't want to do is end up. So we've already looked at Tenjin, and he had his own specific arc, and the tragedy with Tenjin really was feeling like he'd gotten to a point where things were good for him, and then that becoming this idea that sort of a series of events had really ruined his life, and then that had sowed a seed of bitterness, and that was one idea. And with Voljaryk, we've been careful not to tread over the same ground, and so they're both tragic stories in different ways, but they needed to be different. And I think you're right. If there'd been a sense of this sort of blissful confidence in oneself right from the start, you'd have had to either create a traumatic event which then changes him, which becomes too close to other ideas. So as you say, you need to go back to the start and say, well, okay, how would he react if he wasn't that confident? What if when he's doing the whole kind of, I'm going to show you all, even he's ever so slightly nervous that maybe he won't show them all, and that's somewhere right at the back of his head.
It's a very like psychological game into going deep into a character, because sometimes like this method, like explosive temper, try to get respect from the others, that reflects a certain security in there. But if you look at Voljaryk and his story and how everything happens, you'll never be able to tell he's insecure. But deep inside, that is one of the root things in there. And it's like, I feel like this is a therapy about Voljaryk, like how was your day, Voljaryk? And then he talks to us, like, interesting. Okay, have you thought about?
We could at this point hold a solid intervention for him if he walked into the room.
Yes, please.
So for me, the biggest questions I've got. So there's a few things that I just want to make sure that I'm not getting wrong here. I don't know how much of this is, I think, well, obviously when we talk about the old world, the good thing is that the world already knows about the existence of Nikosi. So that's one thing. So the Minotaur race exists as a concept, which is good. I think that's not a spoiler, therefore. But
it's fine. Otherwise, I just mute it.
That's fine then. So obviously they're going to end up slamming into meeting them by accident. These Voljaryk and the rest of the hunting party are going to completely by accident run slap bang into the middle of a group of Minotaurs. I was thinking about that, and it can't be too many, because it needs to be Voljaryk eventually sort of besting them and coming out as the survivor. Unless things have changed drastically by the time we get to the point of the game itself, it can't be that one warrior can take on like 10 of them and kill them all without breaking a sweat, or I don't know if it can be, but it feels like without any further assistance, there has to be a believable number that makes it pretty much impossible, but then still just possible.
So what happened is everything is about perception, how heroes are born, right? So when Voljaryk returns alive, it will just be normal to start making him like this sort of what's the name of Hercules, right? Not this hero guy who went there, killed everyone by himself, and returned with the guy in his back, But in reality, when the things that turn people into heroes, sometimes they are not as grandiose. That's the word.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It's like creating an urban legend.
Exactly.
It grows and it grows and it grows.
Sometimes it's not what people expect. And in the case of Voljaryk, when he's there, and we mentioned that last meeting as being a strong possibility of the event, is Voljaryk makes a decision, a call that gets them into this conflict with the Minotaur. So he's the one who kind of sends people to their death, and he's there doing the things by himself, and he's kind of caring more about him. But at the moment, then when he gets back, suddenly he's the one who killed them all. He's the legend, he's the guy who saved one guy, couldn't help it everyone, but at least he killed all the demons from the other world. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but feel free to interrupt.
No, that makes total sense to me. I mean, for one, the biggest thing that I guess I need to be aware of, and what's really difficult with doing what we were talking about earlier and tying in the plot so that it all works as one very fluid, huge overall arc, is that inevitably we start to bring in. This is the first time that characters who are both separately relevant and have their own quite grand stories have shown up in the same story. Which is obviously one of those things where then I start to sweat a bit and think, oh my god, I've got to get this right when they meet, because then when we write the next story, it's got to be right from the other perspective.
But that's fine, because in Pussy, when he gets to meet Voljaryk, he has been affected by the soul embers, and he's kind of not thinking straight anymore, because he's huge. And I'm gonna mute all that, so you're gonna make a sign for me, so I can mute. I can mute all that, and then speed up to this point.
Just fading in really nice images.
Yeah. I'm gonna possibly use like a Freakazoid music. Have you watched a Freakazoid?
I have. God, I haven't seen that in years. Classic.
When the things violent would happen and they would put like that music.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So basically, what's quite. I mean, it kind of answers my question, which now I don't think we need to mute, which is good. Is that we these guys have stumbled upon the Minotaurs, and the Minotaurs turn to these guys as a perceived threat immediately, because of course you would, because suddenly some completely alien race has just shown up effectively from the eyes of the Minotaurs, and must be dealt with. So the quite nice thing is that we don't need to play our hand too much. We don't need to give away exactly what's going on, because they speak their own language anyway. So it's not like Voljaryk can overhear something. It's not no one's talking to English. So it's a nice way of creating this sudden moment of conflict and give you a little glimpse of something coming without telling you exactly what it is. My other big question is, to get to this point where they meet the Minotaurs, they're all running into they're going into the portal to save the mentor who's been dragged through, and that's fine. They go in, they find him half dead. Before they can decide what to do, they catch sight of, or they hear, let's say, what they think is this giant bull. And Voljaryk goes in deeper. Let's dispatch this thing, finally get it, and then we'll leave with our friend. And it feels like a good sort of, he's not being completely heartless. He's just being, well, practically this is what we came for in the first place, so let's go get it. And he convinces them to do that. And then they find out that all that noise wasn't in fact the bull that he wanted. It is in fact the Minotaurs, and that all kicks off. But the one question I've got in my head is whether or not throughout this period the portal is sat there waiting for them to come back to, which is fine, or if we've got our own reasons for why a portal could be opened, but
the soul ember on Nikos' head would activate the portal.
So what I was thinking is that
are you gonna do this again? I mean, are you gonna say more spoilers? Because otherwise, I wait.
I don't know, because it's basically. I tell you what. Why don't we talk about that after the recording?
Okay.
So that's fine. But yes, so for me, what's quite nice is there's a natural sort of progression of also with that of the secret thing, but that he. What's quite interesting about him is that he's also finding a source of effectively our equivalent of a magical concept. And I was thinking about that as well, because actually that's a hell of a thing for a young man to. It goes back to the classic Spider-Man responsibility quote. It's a weird thing to come back with being the only person who has access to something that he knows is a bit more special than everyone else, and which potentially in his head gives him an edge. And it's how much we want that to be a sense of just purely a trophy that he doesn't know is messing with him, or doesn't know is a poison chalice, or do we want him to be far more have far more agency and say this item is good for me and bad for me, and I choose to use it because. So does he know? Basically, the question is: does he know that it's a corrupting influence, or does he, or is it, or and does it matter?
No, he wouldn't know. It's something that he thinks is he never realized that it's coming from the head. He only thinks it's ongoing hunting, something that's still there, like this dragging of his past pain, and that is just taking a bigger form. But in reality, it is the Minotaur head influencing him, not the impulsive. It's just the I think I can say, but I always want to say what I did. I was just gonna be a 1 minute mute, and yeah, so that's the thing. And also he believes himself because he thinks he is better than the others in a way, but he is the only one capable of preparing them and saving them against those beasts again, to not make the kind of the same mistake. So he's like, oh, okay, like I got everything, I beat them once, I know how they fight, I have not only the mindset for it, but the body, the strength, and the will to punch, that his dream to the reality. So like, how can he make everyone get ready and protected in case of any kind of invasion from these aliens that he thinks might be some sort of god or a test of gods? And that's like, okay, there's not everyone, but not everyone gonna unite, because they're clueless, they have their own motivations, they have their own things to do, different tribes, different ideas.
And that's it. And I think it was quite nice as we can have that real balance between a true, genuine sense of, but I'm the one who can save us all. But then we can also have that gentle sense, especially in his dreams, that even he knows that he's kind of using it as well. Because again, it's a seed of truth. There's an element of truth there. I've seen these things. You don't know what's out there. You need me. And having an argument with one of his, at the time, with his cunning, and someone saying, this is my decision, and him saying, well, sure. I mean, you haven't fought the Minotaurs, have you? Like, as a kind of an undermining, constant little way of being a bit of a dick to get what he wants. And
and not everybody would believe on him as well, because even Conan, when he gets into the place and questioning and everything, and there's other things happening there, but it's like, is it really, is it, what did you find in the woods, like the trailer, and
that's it. And and exactly, and it's if you're the Conan, then and especially if people are around you watching how you react to this younger upstart telling you you're wrong, then of course you're going to try and be as clever as you can, and you're going to be like, well, what I see is the head of something that looks a bit like a cow, and so have you just basically gone and killed an odd cow, and just deliberately kind of try and turn it into a pathetic story that isn't real. And obviously in our story, this angers Voljaryk to the point of sudden and extreme death, which is good though, because ultimately, and what's quite nice is we can always play with this, and the idea that you never really, there's this constant balance between it being about pride and honor and dignity and integrity, and then also secretly being about something a little bit more self-centered and him getting what he wants. And when he gets mocked for this idea that maybe you've just gone and killed the bull, he's not that impressive at all, and he'll take that away with him, and then obviously tragic circumstances occur, a character dies, and that leads to Voljaryk going absolutely mute. But we can have him, even when he's dispatching everyone around him out of absolute fury, he can re-reference that, and he can make it a little cruel joke as he ends this guy as a kind of turns out it was a bit more than a cow than it, or maybe, or like, if it was a cow, then it was easier to kill you than it was that. So you can have him be a bit of a dick. And I just like the idea that throughout this thing you can look at his actions through the eyes really of one of the the clan, one of the town folk, you're constantly saying he's kind of right, but also he's a dick, but he's right, but he's a dick.
Like, exactly. Like, is he the kind of dick that we need in the leadership?
And that's it, exactly.
No,
and it's that constant sense that you realise that he's not the greatest person, but he is the person that you need.
Exactly.
At the front of all this, and I think you'll get that, and especially after getting rid of the kerning, then this general sense of, I mean, the guy's, it's hard to argue with. Like the guy's a nutcase, but he's a helpful nutcase. Yeah. And I think that's
also very big nutcase, very tall and muscly. So before we conclude, just because we have a reached time limit, just letting people know that many of the things that we have, not only for Voljaryk and Ludo, they have all been defined as a plot device and the connection as a meaningful journey, pretty much. And all the meetings that me and Rob have is to filling a little of the gaps to give a stronger meaning in those motivations. For example, what drives Voljaryk and all that sort of things. It's really important for these things. It's a little bit slow process, but it is important because that's what makes a story good. And hopefully, you guys are going to see the payoff of all this hard work when we release the book for Voljaryk.
Yeah, for me, I mean, we all love our tabletop gaming, and Warhammer was, just like a lot of the guys, one of my early strong loves, and that's been in the news lately because Henry Cavill.
Yes,
so that's been all over lately, and one of the things I talked about the fact that he used to be the thing I read all the time, and one of the things I loved about Warhammer was because they'd already built the world, the characters. One of the reasons I think Warhammer is so good is that there is no reason for the characters to be written as well as they are, because the world is already there and the characters exist within it, and you could easily make plot device characters, you could easily make just quick descriptions of who a leader is, and they don't. They give them entire massive epic stories just because they can, of what eventually converts to one small lead figure, or now white plastic, or what lead then white metal, and I think plastic now. I'm showing my age there. They they would do huge stories for one leader in one army of one era, and they do it because it was right to make it that good. And that for me is what we're trying to do with Voljaryk, and hopefully everyone will enjoy it.
Exactly, it's gonna be a very interesting journey for us ourselves. While we go on to finish Voljaryk, and also when we start in crossing, because that one, everything is when you're gonna connect the field. Also, people are gonna be, noticing on Voljaryk, and be like, wait a second, what is the answer for that? And then wait until they cross it. Sometimes, I think it's too much planning, but I hope people appreciate it. All right, guys, see you soon. I'm gonna turn off the recording now.